All right, so we're going to finish up chapter 3, talking about the remaining senses of smell, taste, and touch. Olfaction is the human sense of smell. So, as humans, we can detect over 10,000 different smells. And smells are even associated with things like past memories or past experiences you may have, both good and bad. I know whenever I walk into my parents' house, for example, it has a smell that reminds me of growing up, right? Their house has just a particular smell. Or when I'm making maybe our family Italian recipes, and the smell reminds me of when my mom used to make those same dishes for us as kids. And I'm sure that you can also think of several memories that are triggered by a certain smell. So, our sense of smell is activated when the chemical molecules of a given substance enter the nasal passage and come in contact with what are called the olfactory cells. So, the olfactory cells are receptor neurons of the nose that are spread out over the nasal cavity. And there are approximately a little over 1,000 different types of olfactory cells that have been identified so far. Each of the receptor cells are specialized and only respond to a select number of smells. The responses of the olfactory cells are then transmitted to the brain, where they're combined into recognition of a particular smell. So, sniff tests have actually demonstrated that women typically have a better sense of smell when compared to men. This is actually an ongoing joke, kind of fun note of contention in our house. My husband is actually a wine steward for a grocery store. So he knows quite a bit about wine. He's always tasting different ones and deciding which ones he's going to carry in the store and things like that. But whenever he has trouble identifying a certain note in the wine or smell in the wine, he always asks me. And not always, but I can usually identify him, which I like to sort of give him a hard time and tease him about a little bit. But research has actually shown that women do, in fact, have a better sense of smell. Smell can also serve as a form of communication. So, non human species release something called pheromones, which are chemicals that, when smelled, produce some sort of social response in other members of their same species. So these pheromones can transmit messages like alarm when they might be in danger, or messages of sexual availability for times of reproduction. Um, but we typically see these in non-human animals. Um, Whether or not pheromones are actually a part of the human experience is still largely debated. We do know that we can detect by sense of smell whether someone is male or female. So, typically, just by sense of smell, we can determine the differences. But whether or not pheromones are at play is still kind of up for debate. All right, so moving on to taste. So, gestation, which is the sense of taste, involves receptor cells that respond to four basic stimulus qualities: bitter, sour, salty, and sweet. The receptor cells for taste are located in the taste buds, and there are approximately 10,000 taste buds distributed across the tongue, mouth, and throat. Taste buds do wear out and are replaced approximately every 10 days, which really is a good thing. Imagine if you burned your tongue and that area of the taste buds that were burnt never came back. I burn my tongue all the time. I try to be very careful, but I'm really sensitive to heat of any kind, so hot drinks or hot food, and I burn my tongue all the time. I would be in a bad spot if our taste buds didn't turn over every week and a half or so. The receptor cells, which are in the taste buds, respond to the four basic qualities. So there may also be a fifth quality known as umami. which is a Japanese word that roughly or the most closely translated to English would be something like meaty or savory. And although the receptor cells are specialized and each respond most strongly to a particular type of taste, they're also capable of responding to other tastes as well. So some receptor cells in the taste buds respond stronger to a specific taste. So perhaps the ones that respond most strongly to salty, but they can still detect the other tastes, such as bitter, sweet, or sour, just not as strongly as they react to something that is salty. Ultimately, every taste is made up of a combination of all of the basic flavor qualities. So much like colors are all made up of the primary colors, red, yellow, and blue, um, every taste that you actually experience is made up in some proportion of the four main qualities of taste: bitter, sour, salty, and sweet. And here are just kind of for fun, a few microscopic close-up views of the tongue. So these are what the taste buds look like at very close inspection. So on the bottom left, that's kind of what I think we can see just with the naked human eye. That's kind of what a normal tongue looks like. But when you go under the microscope and go in closer, these other three pictures are more what those taste buds and receptor cells look like. So this one on the top left, that's the taste buds at a microscopic view. These two on the right are actually the receptor cells, which live inside of the taste buds. Finally, we come to the sense of touch. And of course, our sense of touch is transmitted through the sense organ of our skin. It's the biggest sense organ that we have, right? It covers our entire body. Touch can include pressure, temperature, and pain. The touch receptors are located at various depths or layers throughout the skin, and they're unevenly distributed over the body. So for example, certain areas of the skin on the body have more receptive cells than other areas of your body, making them more sensitive. So think about something like your fingertips, right? Those have many more receptor cells than other areas of your body and are therefore extremely sensitive to touch, pressure, to pain. You can just barely poke your fingertip and it hurts a lot. Or even the end of your fingernail or your nail bed. So the ends of your fingers have a lot of receptor cells. There's a dense population of receptor cells on those area of the fingers, so they're highly sensitive to touch. Probably the most researched area when looking at the sense of touch is pain, and rightly so. People consult physicians and take medications for pain of some kind or another more than any other illness. So actually 116 million Americans are affected by chronic pain, which is a lot, American adults. And this costs over $600 billion a year in healthcare every year, right? So pain greatly affects us and our way of living, and many adults in America are affected by chronic pain, which basically means you're always experiencing pain in some area of your body. One explanation for why we feel pain is that it results from cell injury. So when a cell is damaged, it releases a chemical known as substance P, and this chemical transmits pain messages to the brain. According to the gate control theory of pain, there are nerve receptors in the spinal cord that lead to specific areas of the brain that are related to pain. When these receptors are activated because of some injury or problem with a certain part of the body, a quote unquote sort of gate to the brain is opened where the receptors transmit pain messages to the brain. And it results in us experiencing the sensation of pain. However, the gate does not remain open indefinitely. Other receptors, when stimulated, close the gate to the brain, resulting in a reduction in the pain sensation. And the gate can be shut in two different ways. So, first, it's possible that other impulses can overwhelm the nerve pathways that are relating to pain. So, other non painful stimuli compete with and sometimes even displace the neural message of pain that's being transmitted to the brain. And this results in the brain shutting off the painful stimulus. This explains why perhaps when you bump something or hit something and it hurts, so let's say you hit your elbow, your funny bone, it hurts really bad all the way up and down your arm. But when you start rubbing the area, it can make it feel better or lessen the pain because this competing stimuli of you rubbing that area can actually overpower the painful stimulus that is there where you bumped your elbow. The second way the gate can be closed is by psychological factors relating to an individual's current emotions, their interpretation of events, or even their past experiences. So the brain in these instances can actually close the gate by sending a message down the spinal cord to the injured part of the body and actually produce an overall reduction in pain to that area of the body, wherever the damage is caused. This is often why we see soldiers in combat. If they're injured, they often don't feel the extent of their injury immediately. It is possible, and it's being suggested in the gate control theory of pain, that the soldier feels such a sense of relief at surviving that the brain actually signals or sends a signal to that area of the body and overrides the pain altogether. Um, Same thing if people are in car accidents. The injured individuals don't always feel pain immediately after the crash happens. Adrenaline might be coursing through their body, and they might need to move or get out of the car. So, all these different signals are being transmitted by the brain, and those signals are actually overriding the signal that would allow the individual to experience the pain sensation. One last thing I want to touch on is something called synesthesia, because I just think it's really interesting. So, this is a perceptual phenomenon where stimulation of one sensory system involuntarily leads the individual to experience an additional sensory response of a different sensory system. So, what this is basically saying is that when someone experiences one sensation, maybe of sight, they experience another sensation from a different sense organ, so perhaps taste. So, for example, someone who hears a note on a piano, so that's sound, right? So that's one sensation of sound, but then they actually visually see a color. So that's the sight sensation, right? So they experience this additional sensory response of seeing colors after they hear notes of the piano being played. Maybe another example would be someone making a meal or preparing a meal. So this is the touch sensation, right? They're making the meal with their hands, or you could even say the sight sensation, right? They can see the food in front of them. And then they experience perhaps a very bitter taste in their mouth, which is the taste sensation. But this happens without them actually tasting any of the food. So just by looking at it or by touching the food, they also experience this taste sensation. So, synesthesia is extremely rare, and the causes of it are still largely unknown. One explanation that's been presented for this is that these individuals who have synesthesia might have unusually dense neural linkage between the different sense areas of the brain. So, remember, there are like the auditory cortex, and there are different areas of the brain that process smell or process sight or hearing or touch and so on. And those areas of the brain are linked. And so what they're suggesting here is that these individuals have denser linkages. There's more links between those areas, and so they experience these sort of additional sensory responses. Another explanation is that these individuals lack the neural controls that typically inhibit connections between the sensory area. So there are actually neural controls that do inhibit some sort of crossover between the areas in the brain. And it's being suggested that it is possible that these individuals don't have those. So they don't have anything inhibiting the connections between the sensory areas. Just something really interesting, and so I wanted to touch on it. And that's all I have for you for chapter 3.